Story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. I'm 24 years old and my boyfriend is 21. According to him, he has never been with any girl who's had cellulite before, or even an ounce of body fat. Yes, I know what you're thinking, he's a total asshole, which in that sense, he is. But the rest of the time, he's completely fine and actually sweet. We met last year at a friend's party. At the party, I instantly fell in love with him. I thought he was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. And it was reciprocated. I saw him from across the room and he made eye contact. A few minutes later, he walked over to me and just struck up a conversation. I know that people present themselves the way they want to be seen, especially when they're trying to impress someone they're attracted to. He started telling me about how he's studying to be a doctor, how he volunteers at animal shelters, and that every single weekend he also volunteers at the soup kitchen. Everything he said was absolutely perfect. By the end of the night, he had asked me out on a date and I said yes. I did explain to him that I didn't want anything serious and he said that was totally fine. I was trying to focus on my studies, so having a boyfriend was not in my plans. But after we went on 7 dates, he asked me to be his girlfriend. He wouldn't take no for an answer. After about a month, I finally said yes. Mind you, at this point, he hadn't seen me naked, not even in a bathing suit. The very night that I said yes to being his girlfriend, he asked me to come over to his place. He made a whole gourmet dinner, even bought super expensive wine. So we ended up doing it for the first time that night. The next morning when I woke up, the first thing he said to me was, "Do you ever exercise?" I was shocked. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimers are not my story time, I sent me on Instagram. That's when he said point blank, super serious, "Do you ever exercise?" I just stared at him. I had literally just woken up in his bed after the first time we ever did it. Then I thought he must be joking. So I started to laugh a little, and then he says, "No, seriously, do you ever exercise?" I said, "Sometimes." Then he told me, "You should really try to work out at least 5 times a week." I went home and finally texted him saying that I wasn't comfortable with the way he spoke to me. That's when he said that what he said to me was completely normal, and that I shouldn't be offended. This was all in text, by the way. That's when he sends me another text message saying, "You wouldn't have as much cellulite as you do if you didn't eat so much fast food. And if you exercise 5 times a week like I told you." I didn't reply to him for the rest of the day. Later that day, he shows up to my apartment and says, "I should feel comfortable enough to tell you what I think about you." He somehow ended up making me feel bad and I ended up apologizing. Obviously, after that, I became really self-conscious about my cellulite and my entire body. So anytime we were together, I would always stay under the covers. By the way, my boyfriend doesn't have a great body. He's super soft and pudgy. Last week, he told me that he had abs though. Part 3 is story time about how my boyfriend shames me for having cellulite. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. One day, he pulls up his shirt and says, "Look, I have abs." Which, no, he doesn't. He's super soft and has a thick layer of fat on it. I smirked and he said, "What?" And I said, "You don't have abs." Then he says, "Yes, I do. I'm in better shape than you." By the way, he said this in front of his friends, so I was super embarrassed and stayed quiet the entire day. He finally went to drop me off and I was so happy to be home. But he decided to come upstairs with me. Got straight into my PJs. And when I came out of my bedroom, he says, "Wow, your cellulite's getting worse by the day." That's when I finally broke. I turned around and started yelling at him. I told him he had no right to talk about my body the way that he did, and that all he does is objectify me. He started laughing and said, "Wow, those are big words." And that when we met, he thought that I was in better shape. But my clothes obviously tricked him. I'm 5'4" and I weigh 130 pounds. I am by no means fat, but the way that he was bullying me was making me think that I was. That's when I told him that he was the fat one, and that he had a big, huge beer belly. I also told him that his face was super round, but that didn't bother me. Oh yeah, and that his hairy back was gross. Then he said, "Wow, I can't believe you're attacking my physical appearance." Then he stormed out of my apartment, and as soon as he left, I felt happy. We haven't spoken in 4 days. I'm afraid that if he asks me to get back with him, I will. But I should just break up with him, right? What should I do?
Am I wrong for making all the women in my family leave my wedding after they showed up wearing white? I, 33 male, have a large family, mostly aunts and female cousins aside from the mom, stepmom, stepsister, and grandmother. I don't know how to say this, but all those women I mentioned above are into teasing and joking. They formed a unit, which I admit is kind of toxic, and they tease and roast every new woman that enters the family by marriage by setting up tests to see if they deserve to be part of the family, or roast their looks and styles to the point of breaking confidence and self-esteem down. Then, after a few months of teasing, they announced that they finally welcomed them into the family. The newest member would join in on the teasing too. When I first introduced my then girlfriend, now wife, I made it clear that I didn't want any of the women in the unit to come at her or harass her, not even with a single word. They went behind my back and roasted her looks and job, and I discovered they've been doing it on Facebook. I made them apologize one by one after they gave the "we're just testing the water to see if she's capable to be part of the family" excuse. They didn't want to apologize, but once I said I wouldn't invite any of the unit unless they apologized, including my mom, everyone immediately apologized and brought gifts for my wife. My wedding was 2 weeks ago. There was talk about the women in the family wanting to pull a prank on my wife by wearing white and called it the ultimate test to see how my wife would react. My brother warned me, so I announced that if any one of them showed up in white, I'd have them kicked out, including my mom. They said this wasn't true and they'd never do such a thing. But they showed up to my wedding day one by one wearing white dresses, and each and every one of them was told to leave after they tried giving excuses by either making scenes or getting the men involved. The senior women of the unit, who are my mom and aunts, also showed up in white but refused to leave. I threatened to take harsher action, and my mom was pissed, telling me to step aside, but I didn't let her in. I had her leave while the men in my family were watching stunned. Dad was on my side and supported me a lot. My wife was hurt beyond measure, but the women in the family were pissed. My cousin blasted me on social media later, saying I excluded all the women from the wedding because my wife was so insecure she couldn't handle another woman's presence at her wedding. I felt absolutely awful because my wedding was being interrupted by them making scenes. I had an argument with them, and my mom berated me, saying it was supposed to be a prank, but I said they were taking it too far. My mom said I took it too far by kicking them out because they were trying to get a reaction from my wife to see if she was one of those bridezillas and were going to change as soon as the prank was over. But I ruined my own wedding, an entire wedding, by reacting so aggressively. I stopped talking after she said I had to bring my wife and apologize. I haven't seen a lot of them in 2 weeks, and they've excluded me from everything. So, was I wrong for how I handled the situation? Absolutely. Oh my god, look at this. Absolutely not. Your wife is one lucky woman to have a man stand by her like that. Applause to you. Good job. Am I the asshole for exposing the true paternity of my friend's son at her family gathering? This sounds so bad, I know, and I am mortified, but I have no idea what I was doing. I, 40 female, was invited to stop by and see one of my dearest friends from childhood at her mother's home yesterday evening. She lives overseas and hadn't been in the States for years, so she wanted me to stop by even though they had other family visiting her mother as well. When I got there, my friend introduced me to a couple of her cousins and their husbands. At that point, all the kids were downstairs in the playroom, but she called her son to come up so I could meet him. Her son came and shook my hand, and I remarked how handsome he was. He has deep dimples and gorgeous hazel eyes with long lashes. Right behind him was a girl about the same age with the same eyes and dimpled. I said to my friend, "Oh, I didn't know you had a daughter too. You two look like twins." The room was suddenly quiet. My friend's son corrected me and said the girl is his cousin, not his sister. My friend was shooting daggers at me with her eyes as if I said something terrible, and her cousin, who I later find out was the mother of the girl, got up and left the room looking upset. Only this afternoon, when my friend's younger sister called, did I find out why. So apparently my friend had an affair with her cousin's husband. So apparently my friend had an affair with her cousin's husband when she lived with them briefly, and her son is a product of that affair. From what I was just told, she won't admit it, but everyone has suspected it because the older her son gets, the more he looks like the man. I honestly didn't notice the resemblance last night because the husband had just given me a quick wave from the far side of the room where he was watching a game. The reason the cousin, his wife, got upset and left the room is because she suspected something for years, but everyone has worked hard at convincing her she's paranoid and seeing a resemblance that's not there. So, I'm the asshole in the scenario now and ruin everyone's Christmas, or at least that's how it seems because my friend won't even return my calls or texts. No, I would hate to be in that cousin situation. Like, you're getting gaslit from everyone in your family. That is not true family. Like, you made a mistake, these people have to own up to it, but instead they're just hiding it under the carpet, so definitely not the asshole.